We're following big developments in the defense sector this morning. Canada is being chosen to host a new multilateral defense bank, which aims to provide long-term financing for defense projects to potentially dozens of countries. So this all comes as NATO is reportedly set to announce that it's going to select an advanced Canadian surveillance system for its air fleet, shifting away from its previous system that comes from the U.S.
Well, there's Canadian jobs really at the core of this, but it's a lot more than this for Canadian industry and all of the participant nations, countries, industries as well.
Something big just changed. NATO chose Canada over U.S. to control a powerful defense bank. This means Canada is getting stronger, richer, and more important, fast. Two announcements landed in rapid succession at the end of April 2026 that together describe a fundamental shift in how NATO is organizing its military and financial architecture, and Canada is at the center of both. NATO's support and procurement agency selected the Saab bombardier GlobalEye to replace its entire fleet of 14 aging Boeing E-3 Century AWACS aircraft, according to French defense publication La Lettre, and independently confirmed by the German press agency DPA. And on April 29th, multilateral negotiations in Montreal concluded with participating countries unanimously selecting Canada as the future headquarters of the Defense Security and Resilience Bank, a new NATO-linked financial institution designed to reduce borrowing costs for allied defense spending. Both developments, arriving within days of each other, signal a reorientation of the alliance that would have been difficult to predict when Donald Trump was telling the world that America's allies needed to stop freeloading and start paying more. NATO's support and procurement agency awarded the contract to replace the alliance's aging fleet of Boeing E-3, a Century airborne warning and control system aircraft, to Sweden's Saab and Canada's Bombardier, according to French defense publication La Lettre. The two companies would supply their GlobalEye airborne early warning and control platform to replace all 14 aircraft currently operated by the alliance. If confirmed, the award would end a years-long procurement process that saw Boeing's E-7A Wedgetail eliminated from contention after the United States pulled back from the program, and would mark the first time in nearly 4 decades that a non-Boeing platform serves as NATO's common airborne surveillance backbone. The chain of events that led NATO here begins with the United States. In November 2023, NATO had selected the Boeing E-7A Wedgetail as its next-generation command and control aircraft, with 6 aircraft expected and the first plan to become operational by 2031. That plan began to unravel in June 2025. When the U.S. Air Force announced it would drop the E-7 from its fiscal 2026 spending plan in favor of space-based surveillance capabilities. The Netherlands and the remaining European partners announced they were scrapping the 6-aircraft Wedgetail buy, with Dutch State Secretary for Defense Guy Tuinman explicitly noting that the U.S. withdrawal underscored the importance of investing as much as possible in European industry. Washington's decision to cancel its own E-7 procurement, citing cost overruns, delays, and survivability concerns, removed the industrial justification for awarding the contract to Boeing without competition. The NATO Support and Procurement Agency initially awarded the replacement contract to Boeing for the E-7 Wedgetail in 2023 without a competitive tender, due to Boeing's position as the exclusive supplier of NATO AWACS aircraft since 1988. Once the U.S. Air Force walked away from its own order, European partners relaunched a competitive process. The GlobalEye won it. The GlobalEye platform is built around Saab's Aerier Extended Range Radar, capable of detection and identification over air, sea, and land at ranges exceeding 550 kilometers, mounted on a Bombardier Global 6000 business jet airframe. The Bombardier connection is the Canadian industrial component. Canada's Bombardier manufactures the Global 6000 and 6500 business jet airframes that serve as the platform base for the GlobalEye system. Saab is the system integrator, and the Aerier radar is Swedish. The airframe flying beneath it comes from Montreal. NATO is reportedly considering a fleet of 10 to 12 aircraft, with each unit valued at approximately 550 million euros. This procurement could exceed 5 billion euros before additional costs such as maintenance, training, and infrastructure, are included. A contract of this scale, awarded to a Swedish-Canadian solution over a U.S. manufacturer that had held the position since 1982, is not a minor procurement adjustment. It is a realignment of NATO's most visible shared airborne surveillance capability away from American industrial supply for the first time in 4 decades. Canada is also eyeing as many as 6 GlobalEyes for its own Air Force, alongside a potential Gripen acquisition over the F-35, a prospect that carries particular political weight given ongoing sovereignty tensions with the Trump administration. Saab has argued that combined Gripen and GlobalEye production in Canada could support more than 12,000 jobs, leveraging Bombardier's existing global business jet manufacturing base. The second announcement is the Defense, Security, and Resilience Bank. Canada has been selected as the headquarters for a new financial institution led by NATO and designed to reduce borrowing costs for members of the alliance, a senior government official said. The decision was reached after negotiations hosted by Canada involving nearly 20 founding members of NATO's proposed Defense, Security, and Resilience Bank. The financial institution is meant to help NATO members and partner countries meet their defense spending commitments and reduce borrowing costs for military spending by pooling credit strength. The DSRB will provide long-term, low-cost financing for defense, security, and resilience initiatives across supply chains, helping small and medium-sized enterprises and member governments to address critical financing gaps. Participating countries unanimously supported that Canada will serve as host country for the DSRB's future headquarters. Hosting the DSRB is expected to create approximately 3,500 jobs in defense, finance, cybersecurity, and specialized research. The bank will help Canadian defense startups and companies access financing that is currently difficult to obtain due to ESG investing restrictions, acting as a catalyst for innovation in AI, drones, and cyber infrastructure. Canada's Big Six banks have all put their support behind the proposed international defense financing vehicle. Canada is the right home for this new initiative, said David Pearce, Vice President of Government Relations at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. In a world where conflict is an ever-present concern, we are grateful our allies have seen the merit in this move. The political context surrounding both decisions is not incidental. Canada has met NATO's 2% GDP defense spending target this fiscal year and committed to reaching the 5% target by 2035. Budget 2025's historic defense plan, including more than $80 billion in investments alongside Canada's newly unveiled defense industrial strategy, underscore the seriousness with which the Government of Canada is advancing its rearmament efforts and reinforces Canada's role as a trusted partner in collective defense and security. The U.S. Air Force canceled the E-7 program it had been using to supply NATO's surveillance needs. Boeing lost the competition when it was reopened. Canada's Bombardier is on the contract. Canada is hosting the headquarters of NATO's new defense bank. The alliance is spreading its institutional and industrial architecture more broadly, and the country that Washington has spent over a year characterizing as dependent, weak, and easily pressured is the one the alliance chose when it needed a home for its most consequential new financial institution. The broader pattern these two announcements represent is worth naming directly. NATO is an alliance of 32 nations that has, for the better part of 4 decades, organized its most critical military capabilities around American industrial suppliers and American institutional leadership. The AWACS fleet was Boeing. The replacement was going to be Boeing. The financial architecture for defense spending had no formal multilateral home. Both of those conditions have now changed within the same week, and in both cases, Canada is the country that stepped into the space created by American withdrawal or American disengagement. The U.S. Air Force canceled its own E-7 order, which destabilized the NATO procurement that had been structured around it. NATO reopened the competition. The Swedish-Canadian GlobalEye won. The U.S. had no competing domestic financial institution to offer as a DSRB alternative. Canada hosted the negotiations and was unanimously selected as headquarters. None of this happened despite the trade war, the tariff pressure, the annexation rhetoric, and the sustained American effort to characterize Canada as a dependent, compliant, and easily leveraged partner. It happened during all of those things simultaneously. The country being told it has nowhere else to go just became the headquarters of NATO's defense bank and a key industrial partner in the alliance's next-generation surveillance backbone. The world was watching. It made its choice.